A father and his young son are sitting on the front porch together one afternoon. The father turns to his son and asks, "What would you like to be when you grow up, son?" The boy looks up to his father and says,
"President."
Impressed, the father asks, "Are you a Republican or a Democrat?" Confused, the boy asks,
"What's that, Dad?"
The father replies, "Well, if you were president, what would be the first thing you would do?" The young boy thinks for a moment, then replies,
"I'd give food and houses to all the homeless people."
The father beams. "Wow, that's really a worthy goal." Then continues, "But you don't have to wait until you're president to do that. You can mow the lawn, pull weeds, and sweep our deck, and I'll pay you $50. Then I'll take you to where the homeless guys hang out, and you can give them the $50 to use towards food in a new house." The boy thinks over his father's proposal, then asks,
"Why don't the homeless guys come over and do the work and you could just pay them the $50?
The father replies, "You're a Republican, son." When David and Hillary first get married, David tells her, "I'm putting a box under our bed. You must promise never to look inside it." For 30 years, Hillary keeps her promise and never peeks. However, on the afternoon of their 30th anniversary, curiosity gets the best of her. She lifts the lid and peeks inside the box. To her surprise, there are 3 empty beer cans and $2,500 in cash. That evening, over dinner, Hillary can't contain her guilt any longer. She confesses,
"David, I'm so sorry. For all these years, I've kept my promise and never looked in the box under our bed. But today the temptation was too much, and I gave in and looked. Now I need to know, why do you keep the empty beer cans in the box?"
David thinks for a while and finally says, "I suppose, after all these years, you deserve to know the truth. Whenever I am unfaithful to you, I put an empty beer can in the box under the bed to remind myself not to do it again." Hillary is shocked but says,
"I'm very disappointed and saddened, but I guess after all those years away from home on the road, temptation does happen. And 3 times isn't that bad considering the number of years we've been together."
A little while later, Hillary asks,
"So, why do you have all that money in the box?"
David answers, "Well, whenever the box fills up with empty cans, I take them to the recycling center and redeem them for cash." 3 passengers are on board a small twin-engine plane when it develops engine problems. The pilot realizes that the plane will not be able to continue its flight over the mountains. With no place to land, he decides to put it on autopilot and talk to the passengers. Arriving in the passenger compartment, he announces that the plane is going to crash. He tells the passengers that there are only 3 parachutes on board and that he is going to take one of them. With that said, he grabs one of the chutes and bails out of the ailing plane. The 3 remaining passengers look at each other and almost immediately one begins to speak.
"I'm a CEO of 3 major companies. Many important projects worldwide are depending on me to manage them. I'm probably the smartest man on Earth, and therefore I deserve one of the parachutes."
He then picks up a parachute and leaps out of the airplane. The 2 remaining passengers, a priest and a Boy Scout, just look at each other. Then the priest begins to speak.
"I am old and have lived most of my life. I'm confident of my future and not afraid to die. Please take the remaining chute and jump from the plane before it crashes."
The Boy Scout just smiles and says,
"Don't worry, we're both gonna be okay. Remember that last guy, the smartest man in the world? He just jumped out of the plane holding my backpack."
Mr. Smith went to the doctor's office to collect his wife's test results. The receptionist told him,
I'm sorry, sir, but there has been a bit of a mix-up and we have a problem. When we sent the samples from your wife to the lab, the samples from another Mrs. Smith were sent as well, and we are now uncertain which one is your wife's. Frankly, that's either bad or terrible.
Mr. Smith asked, "What do you mean?" The receptionist replied,
Well, one Mrs. Smith tested positive for Alzheimer's disease, and the other tested positive for AIDS. We can't tell which is your wife.
Mr. Smith exclaimed, "That's terrible! Can we do the test over?" The receptionist replied,
Normally, yes. But you have an HMO, and they won't pay for these expensive tests more than once.
"Well, what am I supposed to do now?" asked Mr. Smith. The receptionist replied,
The doctor recommends that you drop your wife off in the middle of town. If she finds her way home, don't sleep with her.
A tour bus in Egypt stops in the middle of a town square. The tourists are all shopping at the little stands surrounding the square. One tourist looks at his watch, but it's broken, so he leans over to a local who is squatting down next to his camel.
Do you have the time, sir?
He asks. The local reaches out and softly cups the camel's genitals in his hand, then raises them up and down.
It's about 2 o'clock,
He says. The tourist can't believe what he just saw. He runs back to the bus, and sure enough, it's 2 o'clock. He rushes back and tells a few of the fellow tourists,
The man can tell the time by the weight of the camel's genitals.
One of the doubtful tourists walks back to the local and asks him the time. The same thing happens. Finally, the bus driver wants to know how it's done. He walks over and asks the local how he knows the time from the camel's genitals. The local says,
Sit down here and grab the camel's genitals. Now lift them up in the air. Okay, now look underneath them. Do you see it?
What am I looking for? Asks the man. The local replies,
There's a clock over there on the wall.
One Friday night, Patrick went up to his friend Patty and said, Patty, I need a favor. I'm sleeping with the bartender's wife. Can you hold him in the pub for an hour after he closes up? Patty was not very fond of the idea, but being Patrick was a lifelong friend, he reluctantly agreed. After the pub closed, Patty struck up a conversation with the bartender, asking him all sorts of stupid questions in an effort to keep him occupied. After some time, the bartender became suspicious and asked,
Patty, what are you really up to with all this?
Patty, filled with feelings of guilt and remorse, confessed to the bartender.
I'm sorry, my friend Patrick is sleeping with your wife right now and asked me to keep you occupied.
The bartender smiled, then put a brotherly hand on Patty's shoulder before saying,
I think you'd better hurry home. My wife died 2 years ago.
Two great white sharks were swimming in the ocean when they spotted the survivors of a sunken ship.
Follow me,
The father shark said to his son as they swam to the mass of people floating in the water. The father shark then told his son,
First, we swim around them a few times with just the tip of our fins showing.
and they did,
Well done, son,
said the father shark.
Now we swim around them a few times with all our fins showing.
And they did,
Now we eat everybody.
said the father shark. And they did. When they were both full, the son asked,
Dad, why did we swim around and around them? Why didn't we just eat them?
The father replied,
Because they taste better. If you scare the out of them first.
Observing from a distance, the store manager watches with concern as a salesperson engages in a heated exchange with a disgruntled customer. After a few tense minutes, the customer storms out of the store, leaving behind a notable air of frustration. Approaching the salesperson with a furrowed brow, the manager's disapproval is clearly evident.
I saw what just happened.
The manager begins, his tone tinged with disappointment.
And it seems you've forgotten our motto. The customer is always right.
Apologizing, the salesperson attempts to explain, but the manager cuts them off firmly.
No excuses! The customer is always right!
With a resigned nod, the salesperson accepts the rebuke, understanding the importance of prioritizing customer satisfaction. Curiosity aroused, the manager presses on.
What exactly were you two arguing about?
Reluctantly, the salesperson admits, well, you see, sir, he called you an idiot. Two old guys are pushing their carts around Walmart when they collide. The first old guy says to the second guy,
Sorry about that. I'm looking for my wife, and I guess I wasn't paying attention to where I was going.
The second old guy says,
That's okay. What a coincidence. I'm looking for my wife, too. I can't find her, and I'm getting a little desperate.
The first old guy says,
Well, maybe I can help you find her. What does she look like?
The second old guy says,
Well, she's 27 years old, tall, blonde hair, blue eyes, long legs, big busted, and is wearing tiny shorts. What does your wife look like?
To which the first old guy says,
Doesn't matter. Let's look for yours.
A police officer waited outside a popular bar, anticipating an easy arrest of a drunk driver. Just before closing time, a man staggered out of the bar. The man could barely remain upright. He was most certainly inebriated. He stumbled around the parking lot for a few minutes looking for his car. He finally found his car and climbed in as the bar closed and the patrons began to leave. He sat in the car for a good 10 minutes. He turned his lights on, then off, wipers on, then off. He started to pull forward onto the grass, then stopped. Finally, when he was the last car in the parking lot, he pulled out onto the road and started to drive away. The officer, waiting for this, turned on his lights and pulled the man over. He administered a breathalyzer test, and to his great surprise, the man blew a 0. The officer was dumbfounded.
This equipment must be broken,
he exclaimed.
I doubt it,
Replied the man.
Tonight, I'm the DD.
The officer looked at him with confusion.
I don't see how you could be the designated driver when you're stumbling drunk.
I'm not,
Said the man.
I'm the designated decoy.
Little Johnny wakes up one morning and heads downstairs for breakfast. On the kitchen table is a huge plate of bacon, eggs, and a pitcher of milk. As Johnny is about to sit down, his mother asks,
Have you done your chores yet?
Not yet.
says little Johnny. His mother says,
No breakfast for you, young man, until you do your chores.
Angrily, little Johnny stomps out of the house to feed the chickens. As he leaves the coop, he kicks a chicken. He then heads to the field to feed the cows. When he finishes, he kicks a cow. Next, he goes to the sty to feed the pigs. Still angry, he kicks a pig. When little Johnny finally arrives back at the kitchen table, he finds just a bowl of dry cereal.
What happened to the eggs and bacon?
Asks Johnny,
Well,
says his mother.
I saw you kick a chicken, so you don't get any eggs for a week. I saw you kick a pig, so you don't get any bacon for a week either.
Little Johnny asks,
Well, can I at least have some milk for my cereal?
I also saw you kick the cow,
replies his mother.
so no milk for a week.
Suddenly, an angry voice comes from the other room. Tripping, the dad kicks the cat in anger. As little Johnny is eating his bowl of dry cereal, he looks up at his mother and asks,
Are you going to tell him, or should I?